Good evening and welcome to ATM. Yesterday, the Prime Minister of Israel stepped up to the world's most important podium, ready to deliver a defiant message. But his first words were met not with applause, nor with protest, but with the sound of silence. The sound of the world walking out. This was not just a speech, it was a diplomatic disaster played out on the global stage. In a coordinated act of protest unseen in modern history, dozens of delegations stood and filed out of the UN General Assembly Hall, leaving the Israeli leader to speak to a room of empty chairs. Why did this happen? What was in a furious, desperate speech that followed? And what does this unprecedented snub tell us about Israel's new, dangerously isolated position in a world that is changing faster than it can comprehend? For those who remained, the speech was not one of diplomacy, but of pure, undiluted fury. We were betrayed, the Prime Minister declared, his voice shaking with anger, by the very nations who claimed to be our closest friends in Europe. This, of course, was a direct scene at France and the UK for their historic recognition of a Palestinian state earlier this week. He went on to call the UN a stage for hypocrisy, a clear jab at the growing power of the global south, whose newfound economic muscle from the GSDB has translated into a unified, confident diplomatic voice. The frustration you hear in his words is that of a leader watching the old rulebook, which for decades guaranteed a unified Western diplomatic shield, being torn up in front of his very eyes. The world, for Israel, has been turned upside down. But let's be clear, the walkout was not a spontaneous protest. It was a meticulously planned act of diplomatic defiance, the culmination of the week's events. The entire Arab League and the African Union delegations left as one. They were joined by key Latin American states. But the real shock, the move that made this a global story, was seeing the ambassadors from France, Spain, Ireland, and Norway rise from their seats and quietly exit. A world map highlights in red all the countries whose delegates walked out, showing a vast sea of red. Reuters correspondents in the hall noted that the British delegate conspicuously took a phone call and walked out, maintaining plausible deniability. This was the New World Order in action, a confident global south, empowered by its new economic leverage, acting in concert with a rebellious and newly independent Europe. It was a silent, devastatingly effective message. The days of automatic Western solidarity are over. But if you listen closely, past the anger, you'll realize this speech had only one true audience. It wasn't for the empty chairs of the UN. It was a desperate, encoded plea to the one ally it has left, the United States. When the Prime Minister looked up and said, "In these dark times, when old friends falter, we will see who our true allies are," he was speaking directly to Washington. Stripped of his European support and facing a unified global opposition, his speech was a gamble. It was an attempt to trigger America's sense of loyalty, to force Washington's hand into not just supporting Israel, but actively punishing the European nations for their betrayal. It was the desperate move of a player who has lost control of the board and is pleading with his most powerful piece to save him. The Great Walkout and the furious speech that followed were the explosive finale to a week that shattered the old Middle East consensus. The Israeli Prime Minister came to the UN to project strength and defiance. Instead, he revealed his country's profound and terrifying new reality, its almost complete isolation. The era of Israel operating under a unified Western diplomatic shield is over. It now stands more reliant on the United States than ever before, at the very moment America's own global influence is being challenged. The old certainties are gone, and the future of the region is now dangerously uncertain. Thank you for joining me on ATM. I'll see you tomorrow.